Library Storytime. I'm so glad you could join me today. Well, the news is that this will be the last story time until summer. Traditionally, we take the month of May off to get ready for summer reading, and we'll all be back the first week of June, with story time. But not to worry, because I wanted to let you know that the Lawrence Art Center is having its last show in the theater and dance for very young people. The season will end with a great activity for you. It's called Splash. That's going to be their last program, called Splash, and it's going to be May 22nd and May 23rd at the old Hy-Vee parking lot on 6th Street. So it's a drive-in type of event. So check the Lawrence Art Center website so that you can join in on Splash. And we'll have some information, some flyers at the library too. But check their website, and hopefully you can join them for that fun activity. Well, today our theme is going to be hats. And for your craft, you can come in and get a paper hat, and I will have flowers, maybe spiders and snakes, dragonflies, crepe paper, even some jewels that you can decorate your hat, and you can wear it like this, or you can wear it like that. And I'll give you some crepe paper. You can make streamers that fall down. However you want to make your paper hat, come and I'll have that ready for you. And you can make a paper hat to celebrate spring. And soon you'll need to keep your head shaded from the sun, so you can make a nice hat for that. And our first book is one of my favorites, Ezra Jack Keats, Jenny's Hat. Because you see, Jenny wanted a fancy hat. And maybe you can make a fancy hat, or maybe you just want to make a plain hat. It's up to you. But let's read Jenny's Hat by Ezra Jack Keats. Ezra Jack Keats has written other books like Whistle for Willie. I love that one too. And The Snowy Day. Oh, I bet you know that one. The Snowy Day, he wrote that. A new hat. Jenny's favorite aunt promised to send her a new hat as a present. Jenny waited and dreamed and waited. Shutting her eyes, she sighed, "Oh, I can't wait for my aunt to send me my new hat. It's going to be big and flowery. It's going to have lots of flowers, and it's going to be, oh, so beautiful." At last, it came. She ran to her room and opened the box. "Oh, no," she gasped. "Oh, it's such a plain hat." "Why, dear, I really think it's quite nice," her mother said kindly. Jenny blinked back her tears and put her hat in the box under her bed. She put on a straw basket to see what kind of a hat that would make. And then she drew pictures. "Hatchoo!" she sneezed. Instead of achoo, she said hatchoo. "Bless you, dear," called her mother. "And what are you doing?" "I'm drawing a caterpillar." "Oh, dear," sighed her mother. "I see." So Jenny tried on more things for a hat. She tried on a lampshade. She tried on a flower pot, TV antenna, and a shiny pan, but none of them would do. Not really. And then Jenny noticed what time it was. It was 3 o'clock, time to feed the birds. She ran to the cupboard, filled a paper bag with breadcrumbs, and started for the park. You see, Ginny went every Saturday at 3 o'clock to feed the birds, and the birds expected her. She went to the park to the very same spot to scatter the crumbs. And birds came, all sorts of birds, fluttering and twittering and cooing. They all knew Ginny. Some of them ate out of her hand. Others hopped happily on her head. Soon every last crumb was gone, and away they flew. And for a while, Ginny forgot about her hat. But walking home, Ginny remembered, and she wished out loud, "Oh, I wish my new hat were just a little fancier." She said that out loud. The next morning, Ginny got up early and peeked out the window. Lovely hats were coming by her window. Fancy, 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 fancy. It was Sunday, and Ginny went to church with her mother and father. And all around her were fancy hats, flowers. It looked like a garden. Fancy, 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 plain, fancy. As they left the church, Ginny saw some of her bird friends, and then more and more birds came. Were they following her? They were. They fluttered down to her plain hat, carrying red and violet flowers and leaves, colored eggs, and even a paper fan. They added a picture of swans on a quiet lake and some big red and yellow roses. I think they heard Ginny say she wanted her hat a little bit fancier. And all the birds came. And they brought 2 big green and orange leaves and more pictures that they had found and some paper flowers. All these things the birds found to bring to Ginny to put on her hat. And they brought more red flowers and a pink valentine. Oh my goodness, all the birds were swooping down, putting things on Ginny's hat, and soon it wasn't plain anymore. And then all the birds swooped down together, flapping and fluttering around Ginny's new hat. And when they lifted up, there on top of her hat, at the very top, was a nest of young, chirping birds. Ginny felt like chirping too. Happy from head to toe, she felt she was walking on air. Her hat was no longer plain. It was truly fancy, complete with little baby birds on top of her hat. People stared in wonder, and behind her flew the birds, watchful and proud. When they all reached her house, the birds, twittering and singing, gently picked up the nest of little ones and flew back to their home in the park. Ginny waved goodbye. "Thank you," she called. "Thank you. Thank you, my bird friends." Ginny's mother helped her wrap the wonderful hat, piled high with lovely things. And even after the flowers and the leaves had dried, it would be saved and looked at and remembered for a long, long time. And that's Ginny's Hat by Ezra Jack Keats. Wow, those birds were so nice to Ginny. Well, I think they appreciated her coming every Saturday to feed them breadcrumbs. Here's a little nest of birds, probably like the one they put on Ginny's hat. Tweet, 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 tweet. And they gently put it on her hat. And then when Ginny got home, they gently picked up the little birds and flew back to their home in the park. Well, let's look at this bird. Do you know what kind of bird it is? That's right, it's a robin. Let's listen to the robin's song. What a beautiful song. I bet you've heard that if you listen carefully. I've heard it outside. That's a robin. Now let's look at this bird. And I bet you know what this is. It's our state bird, the western meadowlark. Let's listen to its song. Wow, that's beautiful. That's the western meadowlark. So do they sound the same or do they sound different? Let's listen again to the western meadowlark. And then let's listen to the robin. They're different, aren't they? Their songs are different. The meadowlark, our state bird, and the sweet robin. Very good. Well, I don't know if you'll see a western meadowlark here around town, but you sure will hear the robin. And if you go out to the Flint Hills, we might hear, oh, that's beautiful. We will hear that beautiful song. Very good. And thank you, birds. Those birds made Jenny's hat. Not plain anymore, but very fancy. Our next story is going to be from this piece of yellow paper. And it's called The Best Nest for Jenny Wren. Now this is Jenny Wren, a little wren. And this Jenny Wren was searching for the best place to build her nest. It was spring and it was time for Jenny Wren to build her nest, lay her eggs, and have her family. And so Jenny Wren took off looking for the best place to build her nest. She flew over a foothill. She flew over a very large field. And she flew over a low valley until she reached Farmer Brown's orchard. And there, in the old apple tree, was Farmer Brown's old straw hat. Jenny Wren said, why, that would make the perfect nest. So she took that straw hat, she turned it upside down, she filled it with soft grass and leaves and made a few alterations and laid her egg. Her egg looked something like this. Now, Jenny Wren was a good mother. She sat on her egg and sat on her egg until one day that egg started to crack, and it went crack, 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 crack. It cracked and it cracked until out of that egg, crack, 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 popped Jenny Wren's new baby bird. And that baby bird went cheep, 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 cheep. Farmer Brown looked up and said, well, that's where my old straw hat went. But he wasn't angry. He said, that's the best nest for Jenny Wren. And here's her little baby bird. Cheep, 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 cheep. Very, very good. Maybe you can do that at home and tell your parents that story. Get a piece of paper and some of your safety scissors, and you can make your own Jenny Wren. Well, our last story today is going to be up on this board, and let's put Mrs. Honey up here on the board. Here's Mrs. Honey. She has a lovely hat on, as you can see. She's got a fancy hat, that's for sure. She has cherries and lace and feathers and all kinds of things on her hat to make it so fancy. Well, let's look at Mrs. Honey's hat. And this is written and illustrated by Pam Adams. Mrs. Honey's hat. Here's her Mrs. Honey, and this is our version of Mrs. Honey. Mrs. Honey's hat. Now, Mrs. Honey had a hat. And on Monday, we're going to go through the days of the week. There's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And then we start over again with Monday. Well, this is Monday. And on Monday, she wore her hat to take her grandson Peter to the park. She bought him some bubble gum and sat on a bench with her knitting. So here's Mrs. Honey with her fancy hat, and Peter, he's got some bubble gum, blowing bubbles. Peter thought, he looked at his grandmother's hat and saw those feathers, and Peter thought, those feathers would make my toy arrows fly better. My little toy bow and arrow, those feathers would make my arrows fly better. So he pulled the feathers off of Mrs. Honey's hat, but in doing that, oh no, he dropped his bubble gum right on Mrs. Honey's hat. But Mrs. Honey didn't notice. She didn't notice that. On Tuesday, Mrs. Honey wore her hat to visit a friend. They sat in the garden in the shade of a tree and ate cakes. They were having a tea party. Some birds flew down to pick up the crumbs, and they looked at Mrs. Honey's hat and they chirped, "Those cherries look good." So they flew down on Mrs. Honey's hat and took the cherries. Yes, those cherries look good. So they picked the cherries very carefully in their beak and flew away, but in their place, those birds left some eggs. But Mrs. Honey didn't notice that now she had bubble gum on her hat. She had bird eggs on her hat, but she didn't notice. So on Wednesday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Mrs. Honey spent a day at the seaside. The sun shone down. The water was just right for paddling. Mrs. Honey felt very happy. Oh, that water felt so good. And afterwards, Mrs. Honey took off her hat, laid it on the towel, and sat in the sun. But who should come along but a hermit crab? And that hermit crab was looking for a bigger shell to make a new home. That shell would be nice. It would make a nice home. And so that hermit crab went over to the hat, took that lovely shell, and hey, I better leave something in its place. That's not polite to take something and not leave something. I'll leave some seaweed. So the hermit crab took the shell and left some seaweed. But guess what? You're right. Mrs. Honey didn't notice. So that was Monday with the bubble gum, Tuesday with the bird eggs, and Wednesday was the seaweed. On Thursday, Mrs. Honey picked some dandelions, and she went out to a pasture. Maybe she's going to make some dandelion jelly. And she took her hat off because it kept falling, and she put it on the fence. A cow in the field saw the hat on the fence. What beautiful big buttercup, the cow mooed. I think I'll just take a bite. And that cow ate that big buttercup, but in its place. The cow's cowbell fell off and landed right on Mrs. Honey's hat. But Mrs. Honey didn't notice. The next day was Friday, and Mrs. Honey had been looking forward to the tour of the old castle. As she took a tour, she said, "Ooh, look at all those cobwebs. This place would do with a good cleaning." But as she was going on the tour, a big spider came down. Oh, the spider said, "That lace would make my spider web much stronger. I'm going to take that." And so the spider took that lace to make its spider web much, much stronger. But in its place, he left some of his old cobwebs. There you go. We'll put the cobwebs right there. And then the spider, thank you, went whoop, back up to the ceiling. Now Mrs. Honey has bubblegum, bird eggs, seaweed, cowbell, and cobwebs. But guess what? You're right, Mrs. Honey didn't notice. Well, that was Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. So the next day would be Saturday, and that was the day of the cat show. Mrs. Honey was taking her fine cat to the cat show. She hoped that she would win first prize. An alley cat looked in the window and saw Mrs. Honey's hat. "Oh, that ribbon might help me to win a prize," he thought. So that cat pulled it from the hat. And what do you think the cat could leave in its place? Yes, you're right. How about some fish bones? And so the cat left some fish bones. But Mrs. Honey didn't notice. She didn't notice. And so Saturday, the next day, Sunday. On Sunday, Mrs. Honey went to church. Everyone seemed to be staring at her. Mrs. Honey said, "Whatever can it be? Oh, they're staring at me. They're looking at my hat. Perhaps it's time I bought a new hat." When Mrs. Honey got home, she looked in the mirror. That was the first time she noticed that her hat had bubble gum, cobwebs, bird eggs, had fish bones, a cowbell, seaweed. No wonder people were looking at her. Mrs. Honey said, "Goodness, I've got a new hat." Oh, but she wasn't sure she liked it. She said, "I've got a new hat, but I think I like the other one better." And that's the story of Mrs. Honey's hat. Very good. Thank you. Thank you so much for watching all this story time season. And remember that we will take a break, the break of May. We won't have story times, but you can rewatch many of them on YouTube. And summer reading will be coming, so be ready for that. Check our website. And remember to come in. Where's our hat? Come in, and you can pick up your paper hat. It won't be decorated, but I'll have lots of things that you can decorate it with. And then you can make your own fancy or plain hat. Thank you so much. Have a lovely rest of your day, and thank you again for watching. Bye-bye.